Posadas. It's a beautiful tradition that recognizes that all outcasts, the forgotten, are also children of God. Now, the story of the baby Jesus may or may not have any basis in fact. That's up for you to decide. But it's a revealing story about a people who felt persecuted. In the Gospel of Luke, I don't know if you've ever, some of you may know more about the Gospels than others, but the Gospel of Luke is my favorite Gospel of all of them. Not because I think it contains a ton of facts, but because it contains this idea of the king, and he turns it on its head, okay? In the Gospel of Luke, the idea of Jesus as king is not about power, it's not about wealth, it's not about fame or success, it's about love. It's about the power of love to transform all of us. In the Gospel of Luke, for example, that's where we have the story of the Good Samaritan, the prodigal son, all of those stories that illustrate that no matter how much you are an outcast to society, you are always a beloved child of God. And that's a powerful message that the culture needs to hear. Now, I've always wondered if the gospel, which I don't know if you know the word gospel, it means the good news. If the Gospel of Luke were written today, who would those be who are not accepted by society at large? Who needs to be recognized and welcomed as the children of God? Well, today, Rican and I have a story to illustrate how that gospel, how it might go.
Mary was frightened. How could this happen? She fretted in her bedroom and pulled her stuffed bear close to her chest as she cried. Sure, she occasionally went on dates. She dreamed of a life with someone who loved her and with whom she could have a life and a family of her own one day. She was older now, after all. And someday she wanted to get married. But here she was, pregnant. She had tried to hide it for as long as she could, as she knew her parents would be upset. She wore baggy clothes to hide the lump. But now she was showing. She was so scared. Mary knew she had to share the news with her parents, and she was afraid of what they would think. Sure, she could tell her parents about the dream, that strange dream she had a few months before, where an angel visited her and told her she was special and chosen to have a child that would be a miracle of light in a very dark world. Surely her family would understand. But they didn't understand. They did not listen to her about the dream. At first they cried, then they yelled, then more crying. What would the neighbors think? Their church, their rabbi? And when it was all over and done, they made it clear to Mary that she either had to go or the baby did. Mary couldn't stand the thought of giving up this precious child. So Mary put some belongings into a small suitcase. She was determined that her baby would have a place where it would be welcome and loved. And though she could not think of such a place, and it was dark outside, she opened the door and walked out of the only home she had ever known.
Joseph. The bus station where Joseph waited was dark and deserted. Sitting outside on the cold metal bench, he looked up to the stars and he worried about his future. With no work for him in the last several months, Joseph hadn't been able to pay his rent. He had to sell some of his tools to buy food. He didn't have an address to put on his job application and no cell phone to return calls or arrange for interviews. And why couldn't he find work? Because people were afraid of him. He'd never heard a fly. But it didn't seem to matter. He was Muslim, and everyone was afraid he was a terrorist. No one trusted him. He wondered, should I go to Bethlehem City and make a new start? Do I hide my faith so I can find work? Do I trust that Allah will make it all right? Joseph wondered what the choice would say about him. The bus would arrive soon, and Joseph stood up to go get in line and look around. And there, across the parking lot, was Mary. Joseph knew her from the same class together that he dropped out of to start his carpentry business. As one of the popular girls, she'd always been friendly to him, though he ran with the geeky crowd. She always had a nice smile for him as they passed in the hallways. They were both excited to see one another and relieved, partly just so they wouldn't feel so alone. They were each so grateful to have someone to talk to. And as the bus arrived, they both got on and they talked all the way to Bethlehem City. They shared stories about their fears of being rejected and the worry that it would always be that way. They talked about their beliefs that people were good even though much of what they did came out of fear. And they talked about the dream of living in a place surrounded by faith and courage. All of this they talked about for hours, when suddenly, last stop, Bethlehem City. Please take all your belongings before you exit the bus. So they descended the bus steps and they noticed that there was a rather large woman in a bright flower dress in the center of the empty square. She wore a thin scarf across her broad shoulders, didn't seem to be enough to keep her warm, and although she appeared to be trying to light a candle against the cold and biting wind. As they stepped off the bus, the large woman turned around and faced them. A broad smile fell over her face, a twinkle appeared in her eyes, and she bellowed out the words, "Welcome! Welcome to Bethlehem City."
"Welcome," said the woman. "Welcome to Bethlehem City." "Who are you?" Mary asked a bit cautiously. "Who am I?" cried the woman, appearing insulted. "I am the welcome wagon." "Really?" Mary asked. "Well, actually, I just arrived in Bethlehem City a few hours ago. I came in on the bus right before yours. My name's Michelle, but it seemed to me you could use a friendly greeting, so I thought I'd welcome you." Mary and Joseph looked at one another and then at Michelle. Do you know of a good place to sleep for the night?" asked Mary. Michelle turned into one direction and was about to point, but stopped. "Oh, Michelle said as she shot a glance behind him to the neon sign that said in, only a half block away from where they stood. Well, what are we waiting for? Joseph said. Let's go see if we can get some rooms. But Michelle began to protest but fell silent. She didn't want to trouble them with any explanation of what had happened to her just a short while before. Mary and Joseph had already picked up their belongings and were beginning to walk towards the mission. Michelle began to follow at a distance. When they arrived at the mission, they knocked on the door. A large man with neatly combed hair answered. "How can I help you two?" he asked politely. "Is there any room here to spend the night?" Joseph asked anxiously. Michelle was leaning back against the wall out of sight. "Yes, we have rooms," the man replied. "Come in." Relieved, Mary and Joseph gathered their things to go inside, and they turned to Michelle. "See, that wasn't so hard," Mary said. "Come on, Michelle." With that, the man with neatly combed hair poked his head out of the door and looked at Michelle. "You again! I thought..." Then he stopped and started over again. "We only have one room," the man said, clenched teeth. Mary and Joseph looked at one another. Then they looked at Michelle, who hadn't moved. Looking back at each other, they nodded. "I think we can all share," Mary said. "Well, in any case, we don't have room for him," he said, nodding at Michelle. "You two are welcome, but he will have to go somewhere else." Mary and Joseph were both stunned. What did the innkeeper mean by he? "I don't understand," Mary pleaded. But the man at the door wasn't listening anymore. "Look, do you want the room or don't?" he spoke, whistling. "I can't hold the door open all night." Their eyes wide, they looked at the man. Then they looked back at Michelle, who now had tears coming down her cheeks. "No," said Mary, her eyes fixed on Michelle. "We'll find another place." With that, the door was slammed in their faces. I guess I should have tried to explain," said Michelle. "See, I was born with the soul of a woman, but the body of a man. But I don't want to live with that lie. I am a woman, but people like me are not welcome here. There are some people, even in Bethlehem City, that only like to deal with people who look and act just like they do." They all thought for a moment. Then Joseph spoke. "Do you believe there's a place out there where we are all welcome, that we can find together?" he asked. Michelle smiled her big smile. "Yes," she said, "I do believe in such a place." They all nodded in agreement, and together they got ready to set out again.
"You didn't want to stay there anyway," came a laughing voice. "No cable, no room service, and they don't even leave a mint on the little old pillows." Halfway up the street, apparently having seen the whole thing, stood a woman. With her hands on her hips, she stood defiantly, silhouetted against the glow of a giant illuminated plastic hamburger. Surprised, they looked at her, Stanley boldly in front of Hamburger Heaven, a fast food restaurant. They were all unsure what to make of this or how to respond until she waved them forward. As they approached, they could see better that the woman called them was quite young. She was slight and beautiful with olive skin, and she smiled as she spoke, the words coming with a decidedly different accent. "Believe me, you're better off," she said. She introduced herself as Marguerite and explained that she had spent the last month and a half looking for jobs. A disheartening thing when no one wants to hire you, though you work hard, only because you don't have the proper paperwork. At that moment, a large woman wearing a red and white striped apron came out from Hamburger Heaven and yelled out at them, "Stop loitering about and scaring away the customers. I told you there's no jobs here for the likes of you. So if you want to come here, you'll have to buy something like everyone else. Otherwise, you can't stay." And she hurriedly went back inside, the door slamming behind her. Marguerite sighed. Undocumented workers are not very popular in this town unless it's fruit-picking season. Then they can't get enough of us. But I want more than that. I want to have a family and a home, a good job where my children don't have to live in fear like in the old country. But no one seems to care about that. They just care if I have the right papers. Marguerite sighed. I was hoping Bethlehem City was different, that would let me build a life, but I guess I was wrong. At that moment, each one of them was thinking to themselves how nice it would be to feel accepted, even though something about them made them different and scared other people around them. "Do you think," Michelle said, "do you think there's such a place? A place where people will accept you as you are? Where they might accept us too?" Marguerite smiled at the thought of being included. "Yes," she said, "yes, I can imagine such a place." And with that, they looked at each other, picked up their things, and scanned the horizon. "Come on," said Marguerite. "There's got to be some place, somewhere in this town where we can stay."
Joseph, Mary, and Michelle and Marguerite came to a corner where a new sound emerged. Down a dark alley, the sound of guitars strumming and humming and a soft voice came drifting through the streets. Out of curiosity, they followed the sound to a small fire lit. Beside it sat a man all alone in the darkness, humming to himself. As they walked closer to him, the man smiled at them. He introduced himself as Bob. He had been homeless for several years now. "I park myself outside the wealthy restaurants around town. I can make enough to eat and even share a little." "Don't you have a job?" asked Mary. Can't seem to hold one down. I get all kinds of anxious when I try. I can't seem to work. The humming helps me calm down. They call me crazy, but I'm just different. But my hope is that I am helping, that I'm helping people to notice others need help, that someday won't be like it is today, where people don't ignore those who need a little something, that one day it will be a place for all people coming together to do what needs to be done, not caring about who gets credit or who makes a profit, but caring instead for those who need help. I need a job, said Joseph, but people are afraid of me. I need a job too, but I don't have the right paperwork, said Marguerite. People think I'm crazy too, said Michelle. Then you're all in the right place, said Bob. You can all come stay with me. It's a place not far from here. It's just an old empty warehouse that hasn't been used in years. There's no furniture, and the light shines in from the street through an open panel in the ceiling. But I brought in some straw for the fields, and with it a few blankets. I would be happy if you would join me there. Grateful for the invitation, they all agreed they would love to share one another's company, especially Mary, who by this time had grown very tired. The others could see that she was experiencing some pain. So without fanfare, they walked together the short distance to an old aluminum door facing the alley. It was half of its hinges when Bob opened it. One by one, they crossed the door. Inside was a mostly dark open room. The light shone down from the ceiling where a piece of siding had fallen away. The street lamp above glowed brightly and seemed to shine directly onto a wide patch of straw with many blankets. Next to the straw lay a couple of books, some fruit, and a painting of a farmhouse with many people milling about. I know, Bob said, starting to get nervous. It's really a magnificent place you have, said Michelle. You are very kind to invite us in. It's not the Ritz, replied Bob, humming softly to himself, but it gives me a place to stay, a place to come out of the cold. As if it had been done 100 times, Bob went over to a candle and pulled out his lighter. He lit the candle, bowed his head in prayer, and said, "World, you are not always easy, and you are not always fair, and it is easy to feel alone, even while in the heart of your cities. But you are filled with kindness and thoughtfulness waiting to be discovered. Someday the wealthy will come and sit down next to those who want, and we will know you as you truly are." Someday, added Michelle, people of all different backgrounds and beliefs will work towards building a common love for all people. And those of every color and race and heritage will call themselves family, returned Marguerite, where we will not fear one another and our differences, said Joseph. Someday, world, continued Mary, every life that is connected to you will know that it was chosen to bring light into a dark place, and that we are all blessed. We all said, Amen.
Midnight before everyone had settled down, As they shared their stories with one another, Mary began to get a little uncomfortable. And then it was painful. It was labor pain. Her baby was coming, and it was in this warehouse, of all places, that she'd have to give birth. Joseph noticed first the look on her face, and suddenly everyone was pitching in. Some food and water were found. The cleanest of the towels were collected. Marguerite, who had midwife before, helped with the breathing. The rest offered comfort however they could. But the next 3 hours were still a difficult and trying time. Mary screamed, and Joseph comforted, and everybody practiced their breathing. And Bob hummed. Finally, close to 5 in the morning, Mary gave birth to a baby boy amid cheers. Mary was exhausted but happy, and the baby cried for only a moment and then quieted down, looking around almost instantly to see the many strange faces making cooing noses all around her. Finally, with all the stress of the last few days behind her, Mary began to cry. Not tears of sadness, but those of joy. In her head and in her heart, she kept remembering the words that had come to her the months before in a dream. You are chosen, the voice said, to bring into this world a child who will bring light into a dark world, who will heal the people's hatred and bring fellowship where only fear was known. Maybe, Mary finally said out loud, maybe it's true after all. I kept wanting to believe, but now maybe I really have to. If a baby could bring together such a band of outcasts, if his birth could call everyone to come together, maybe this baby really is chosen. He's so innocent. What does he know of hatred? What kind of prejudice could possibly be in his heart? Only what he might learn from the people around him, from us. He'll learn the hard way, like we did, about the fears and prejudice, Michelle said bitterly. But the others, they shook their heads. It's up to us, said Mary, to teach him to have the courage to love beyond our fears, beyond what is foreign to us. That is how light will come to this world. Everyone agreed. So strong was the love in that old dark warehouse, so hopeful was the mood, so joyous was the spirit, that it was as if a light shone brighter in their little warehouse than anywhere else.
Something of that light seemed to spread throughout the city. It was as if their love had expanded outward, bringing warmth and light. And the light drew people from everywhere. It seemed to call to them. And slowly, one by one, people began to enter the warehouse to see what was going on. In walked the man with the neatly combed hair from the mission and his staff, and the woman from Hamburger Heaven, all the people from the motels along the street. Many who came they did not know. Young, old, rich, poor, they all came. As they all began to gather, they wondered at the scene before them. A mother and her baby, and a bunch of wise people looking on adoringly, and everyone under the light of a neon lamp. The newcomers began to gather closer. They felt a little awkward at first. Most of them recognized somebody in the circle around the baby, and most of them remembered them as someone whom they had rejected. For a moment, they paused. All the while, those around the baby took notice as well. Michelle saw the man from the mission, and Marguerite noticed the woman who had yelled at her. Joseph saw the people who had been frightened of him. And each wondered if they had it in themselves to open up again, to face the pain of rejection once more. It would be so easy to give them a little of their own medicine, to turn them away. As if for guidance, they looked down at the baby before them, beautiful and precious in the glowing light. Then it was as if they heard Mary's voice all over again. What does he know of hatred? What kind of prejudice could possibly be in his heart? Only what he might learn from the people around him, from us. It was at that moment that something turned in their hearts and shifted in the room. The circle around the baby opened up and those around the edge moved closer. People all around joined hands. Those who had never met and those who had grudges of long standing, and they saw that the circle was big enough for everyone. But not everyone had arrived. For just coming through the door were more people bringing food and drink from the club and blankets and a real bed with a real crib. And behind them all were two worried-looking people. It was Mary's parents. They had come looking for her when they realized their love was larger than their fears. And as they moved closer, Mary sat up and held out her hand. And as they touched, a new day dawned, and